Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. We'll get started at this time. Uh, just a quick question regarding the audio there. You see I had to update a headset. So if you would, uh, type OK in the chat box if you're hearing me clearly, would you? All right, great. I need to pause for just 1 minute to take care of a technical issue, and then I'll be right back. Don't anybody go anywhere. Looks like we're up and running fine. And just one moment, okay? Okay, sorry everybody, I'm back. Let me just ask one more time. Type okay in the chat box if you're seeing my screen all right and hearing me clearly. All right, great. I've got enough responses. Looks like we're good to go. Thank you for your patience. So we'll be covering some fundamental news here as we get started, and then we'll jump on the live charts. We'll take a look at the movements, what's been happening today, what we think could still happen, some opportunities that maybe could bring some potential profits, and we can cover any other ideas that any of you come up with if you're suggesting assets to look at. So as we get going, keep in mind that obviously investments have risk. No one trade is guaranteed to profit, and so manage your risk accordingly in a way that makes sense for your account and your balance. What we cover is not meant to be financial advisement. It should be taken from an educational perspective. And you can find our full risk disclosure statement on our main website there. So let's go ahead and get into the basics here before we move on. Fundamental analysis, what is it? Alexander, my name is Troy. I'm a senior account manager with AvaTrade, and I tend to do the English-based webinars. And another gentleman named Naim also does some of the English webinars. And you'll find all of the webinars on our YouTube channel recorded. So if you can't catch all the live sessions, you can catch them recorded, usually uploaded by the next business day to take a look at the strategies and concepts and ideas that we cover from the recordings as well. Okay, so fundamental analysis. Yeah, hello Sharon. Glad you made it. Fundamental analysis. I think most of you probably understand what that is. It's the big news stories, the economic reports, all of those sorts of items that come out that help you maybe get an idea of the sentiment about a certain asset or asset class for that matter. And so this type of news tends to come in two main groupings as we talk about it in the webinars. One would be regular economic events. That's one type of fundamental news. It's more predictable in terms of when it will be, what it will be about. And those types of economic events are, things like factory production numbers, GDP numbers coming out, PMI numbers, those types of regularly scheduled economic events are easy to plan for in terms of timing and content and what asset it may or may not affect. The other type of fundamental news is not as easy necessarily to plan for in terms of timing and scope, but we'll talk about ways that you can plan for unexpected news, and it's referred to on this slide as extraordinary economic events. Things like the pandemic situation. It certainly is an extraordinary Okay, is the audio back? Okay, my apologies. Looks like we have a little bit of a technical issue. So I was just talking about the two different types of uh, fundamental news. One being regular economic events that are scheduled, like NFP, GDP numbers, etc., that we know exactly when they'll be and what country they'll affect and which assets they'll affect. And the other type of fundamental news is extraordinary news, like you find with this pandemic news that comes breaking at any moment, and you're not sure what it will be about or when the timing will be with those sorts of extraordinary events that are considered fundamental news as well. By the way, if the sound goes out again, please let me know. I may try another USB port on the computer if the audio keeps going in and out. Okay, so let's take a look at the latest fundamental news and see which way maybe the wind is blowing, so to speak. So we see the headlines. Wall Street gains as U.S. States start to reopen, and this was expected. We talked about this last week, that maybe there's going to be some positive momentum on the markets as different countries start to reopen their economies, and that maybe some of this momentum will be short-lived, as maybe some other negative news article breaks about another hot spot of infections or an uptick in deaths maybe in certain areas, but to be ready for these types of headlines and days like today, in case the momentum is swinging positive, like it did today, to know which way you might prefer to trade, and then go in and set up your entry points using technical analysis on the chart. And so as we look at this snapshot, and I like to do this before I trade, do you get an idea of positive momentum or negative momentum when you look at just this snapshot right here that I'm circling on the chart? Does that look like positive sentiment today when you look at the futures, even before the market opened today, and you look at the VIX index, which is the volatility index? Yeah, it looks like positive momentum. And that was showing even before the US markets opened today. Now, as the US markets opened, the Dow, the S&P, the NASDAQ went green right away. That was expected because we could see what the futures were doing earlier today, and we could see what the VIX index was doing. And if you don't understand about the VIX index, it's a volatility index, and some refer to it as the fear index. And many times, as volatility is dropping, then fear is dropping, then the markets tend to climb. Okay. Okay, Ebert, I'm glad you're back. I'm glad your sound is working. And it may not have been you with the sound problem. I had a little bit of a sound issue with my USB port, with my microphone setup. So, and please, if the sound goes out, please right away tell me so I'm not talking on and on without anyone hearing me. All right, so the main point here is it's not hard, even early in the day before the US market opened, to see that the futures were green and the fear index was dropping, the volatility was dropping. Okay, so once you see that and you see the headlines, it's easy to start to get a feel for which way you might prefer to trade. Other headlines that have been here: Georgia cafes. Georgia's a state. We're not talking about the country Georgia. We're talking about a state in the U.S. Cafes, theaters open. U.S. states ease more restrictions. Again, that's giving positive sentiment to investors to say, ooh, states are starting to open up. Businesses are opening. That's going to help economies, right? And so other headlines: U.S. companies seen adapting despite Great Depression level hit. Again, positive sentiment in the headline. U.S. companies are adapting despite all the problems that they've gone through, whether it's having people work from home, finding ways to make things work and get their businesses running. These are positive headlines. Okay, a lot of this came out today. U.S. banks gird for mad grab of another $300 billion in new small business aid. That passed just late last week. Okay, so more aid from the US government to US companies, to businesses, small businesses, so that they can continue to pay their employees even while they're quarantined, so they can stay open and pay their bills and be on their feet when these states that we see are reopening, the businesses haven't had to shut down because the US government passed first over a $2 trillion aid package and now another $300 billion aid package, and they're saying they'll do more if needed. So this is giving the markets, at least US markets, confidence. So all of these headlines are US centric, but it also helps markets around the world because it's such a global marketplace anymore. And what's good for China is good for the US. What's good for the US is good for Europe, etc. Okay, in general. So we see positive headline after positive headline since this morning. So it was easy to say, maybe I should be looking for support levels with the Dow Jones or with the S&P 500 to trade up. And maybe I shouldn't be in such a hurry to trade down on those assets. And vice versa, if we're looking at the yen pairings, yen being a safe haven currency that tends to weaken when there's positive sentiment, and maybe go against the yen with something like the Australian dollar or US dollar or the euro or the pound, etc. Okay? So as you look at the headlines, you get a feel for what I would have preferred to do if you had looked at this news earlier in the day, and maybe what you still might prefer to do moving forward today. Some specific companies, GM suspends dividend program. That's not good, right? There's a negative for a specific company, right? GM suspending dividends. So not paying stockholders payouts for now. They're suspending it. That might make people not want to hold stock for them, at least temporarily. That might cause a little bit of a sell-off. I'm not saying for sure GM stock will drop, but that's not a positive thing, suspending dividends. Apple delays iPhone production ramp up. Okay, also not a positive headline specifically for Apple, right? So you can also start to look beyond the whole indices and look specifically at stocks, specific stocks to trade on. And so you might notice the NASDAQ didn't go up as much as maybe the Dow Jones and the S&P 500. Well, the NASDAQ is heavily moved by Apple, right? So specific stocks that are big enough and traded enough can sway the movement sometimes, even of an indice. All right, so we look at some headlines and things to be aware of. All right, so before we get on the charts on my demo account, and you're welcome to have your live accounts open as well, let's take a look at a product that I think is important to understand. I've had more and more of my clients saying they've used it, they like it, it's helpful, especially when there's high volatility on certain assets. If you have not downloaded the AvaTrade Go mobile app, and by the way, for anyone who was having access problems in the past like 2 or 3 business days last week, near the end of last week, there were some issues, connectivity issues with the AvaGo app as we were doing some routine maintenance and upgrades. Always make sure you have the MT4 mobile app as well as a backup. Have both apps just in case one has some kind of issue. It's not a typical thing. You shouldn't expect that there are going to be login issues, but just in case, have both apps. Now, in general, the AvaTrade Go app is very good. It works very well and it has nice features. And one thing I want to show you about the AvaTrade Go app is as you're setting up an order, it does some things for you. As you put your trade size, it calculates how much margin is required. Okay, it knows your leverage on your account. As you put the trade size, it tells you how much has to go to margin. So you're not guessing if you don't know how to do that type of calculation yourself. It has feature like Ava Protect for the currency pairings and for gold and silver. You can put protection against any losses that occur added back to your account for the time period you pick for the premium cost that it shows. Okay, so it's kind of a no-brainer. If I was going to trade on an asset and I was going to expose, X amount to my stop loss, and I look and I say, wow, I could have unlimited exposure coverage for if the price is less than you were going to expose to your stop loss anyways, then for that time period that you pick, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, whatever coverage period you pick, no matter how far it goes the wrong way, as that coverage ends, any negative floating gets added back to your account. The trade keeps running. Now you could add your stop loss if you wanted to, right? And hopefully it just goes the right way. You get all your profits and you only have that upfront cost for that protection. Okay. And that's for gold, silver, FX pairings. And you also could close the trade early. Let's say it started to go the wrong way. You notice, let's say you were buying on gold and gold dropped to the next major support level. And you say, well, I still have half a day's coverage left. But I think it'll go up from here. So you could manually close, collect the negative as a payback from the coverage, and then reopen and put your stop loss just below the support. And that would be an example of manually closing the coverage rather than letting it expire by time. Okay, so nice options. And by the way, with this app, if you put your take profit or your stop loss and program it in, it tells you how much you're risking based on the trade size and the distance to your stop loss. If you're doing a pending order, you don't have to know about buy stop, buy limit, sell stop, sell limit. You don't have to know the technical names for pending orders. You just tell it where you want it to buy from, where you want it to sell from, and it does it for you. It makes it a buy stop if you say I want to buy from a higher price. It makes it a buy limit if you program it to buy from a lower price. You don't have to know what those are called like you do on the MT4 platform. Okay, so it simplifies things for you on the AvaTrade Go app. Nick, it is not available in Canada yet, but it will be soon. Okay, we're working on it. For anyone who doesn't know, Canada has its own regulation, like a lot of countries, and so we're regulated through a separate entity with Canadians, and we're just working that out, and we'll have the app available in Canada, I think, soon. So check with your account manager, Nick, and I think it should be available in the coming months, okay, if not weeks. All right, so it's a nice tool. It's nice for managing risk. Let's go ahead and take a look at the charts now. Let's see, last I looked, the positive sentiment had a bit of a pullback, which could create some opportunities if you believe there'll still be this positive sentiment through the rest of the day. And so let me take a look here. I actually did not get my charts opened. Let me just pause things for a second, and I'll get things set up. Just 1 second. Don't go anywhere. Okay, type OK if you're with me. I'm back, and you should be seeing my MT4 screen. Okay, great. Someone's asking, do I think gold will hit 1800? My answer is, I think it's possible. And so I know that's maybe not what you're looking for, but honestly, a trading strategy probably shouldn't be about trying to guess the market. And we'll talk about that as we set up some ideas here. If you're trying to guess the market, you better have some driving fundamental reason as to why you believe that. Okay. I think there's a lot of bearish pressure still to come on the markets, even though today had bullish, positive momentum. I think there's probably a lot of bearish pressure coming, a lot of recession fears still to come, with probably bad GDP numbers, bad factory production numbers, etc., over the next quarter or two because of all of this quarantining that's gone on with major economies. So could gold hit 1800? Certainly it could, maybe even higher, right? So, but the question is timing. When do you get in? When do you get out? How do you manage risk? And that's what the strategies are about. And if you follow the strategies properly, you don't even have to try and guess whether it'll hit 1800. You just get in because your checklist of rules say you should. Yurlin, with Boeing and some of these stocks we have available that are related to the travel industry, you have to keep an eye on what the federal government in the US or in whatever country that stock is from might be doing to assist. And I know in the US specifically, they said they're not going to do bailouts for companies like Boeing, but they certainly will look at doing low or no interest rate loans to companies. And so what do you think would happen with Boeing stock if you saw a headline break right now that said US government to give $500 billion loan to Boeing, interest-free loan to Boeing? Probably it would go through the roof, right? So these are the things you can prepare for, because Trump is all about the economy. He's all about making sure the economy will recover again. That was his focus his first 3 years as president, was improving the economy, and he did so in a big way. He wants that again, certainly. So anything that can be done to assist these major companies, you could probably bank on the fact that there'll be efforts to do that. And so, if you see something like Boeing is at a very low spot, and you see a resistance level that it seems to not be able to break through, what kind of pending order can you put above that resistance level, just in case an article breaks that, hey, big loans are going to Boeing? You don't even have to know that that's what was going to happen, but you have your pending order above the resistance level, just waiting for it to break through. Yeah, buy stop. Exactly. So that's the type of fundamental news we were referring to, one of the types that you just don't know what it will be or when it will be, but you can still prepare for it. So why don't we bring up Boeing and take a look at what's happening with it? And it'll be interesting to walk through the process that we're talking about with Boeing. So we can take a look and we can say, okay, what did Boeing do today? It dropped and flattened out. These are 5-minute candles. Here's 15-minute candles. Okay, so we're looking at the 27th. We just opened markets here. Okay, understand Boeing's not traded on the futures, right? So the market, you're able to trade on Boeing when the US market opened, right? And so what did it do? It dropped after opening. It's trying to recover. It's moving sideways. I see a major support level here. Okay, somewhat major. So support, breakthrough here on Friday. It broke that support and down it went. So if Boeing comes up and breaks above this resistance level, this broken support becomes resistance. If it breaks above there, you might deem that, hey, there must have been good news for Boeing. So you might say, okay, I'll put a buy stop here. And type okay if you're still hearing me. Someone's telling me no sound again. Okay, good. It's just the one person then. All right. So what we're looking at here is preparing for the unknown, for the potential that could occur. And if we let's look at like 1-day candles. All right. Look at the potential here. Here's the old support level on 1-day candles. Support, and then since the pandemic, look at the drop. Look at the drop since the pandemic. Okay, so to take a shot at strategic spots, whether it's this old support level that's not that old, this is just from Friday, or maybe you say, no, that's too soon. Maybe you say, if it goes above this gap, this was from a week or two earlier, right? So it gapped down here. This was from the 20th, early last week. So it gapped down here and then continued to go sideways and down further. So maybe you say, this is not where I think it takes significant news. Maybe you say, I would rather, and let me get rid of this line. Sometimes it's hard to activate these lines. There it is, delete. Okay, maybe I get rid of that line as my entry point, and I say I would rather enter if it goes above this gap from last week. Then I think there must have been really significant news for Boeing. And so it has to go through not just one resistance level, But the second one that involved a pretty big gap here for you to say maybe, okay, now I'm in with my buy stop. Okay, and then you put your stop loss not just below one support level, but down below two support levels, and gives you a bit of flexibility on your stop loss and takes bigger momentum for you to get in on your buy stop. Okay, those exactities, meaning exactly where you say, okay, I think that means there was significantly good news if Boeing goes up to X spot. That's up to you as a trader, but the concept is still the same. If it breaks through enough resistance, you might say, okay, I'm in. That must have been really good news for Boeing. And just have an eye on it. Adjust your buy stop entry points if you're waiting for a breakthrough up to spots that make sense each day or each week. And eventually it could happen, right? That big news that big loan or something's going to Boeing and Boeing goes up who knows how much in a short period of time, and you got your buy stop waiting. Not a bad way to go with some of these specific companies that have been hurt the most right now. Those that drop the most have the most room to go back up, right? If the right news hits. And you don't have to pretend or guess. You're just waiting for confirmation with breakthroughs on resistance to get in with your buy stop. Okay? All right, so that's Boeing, and I think it has huge potential to climb eventually. Let's look at Apple with the headline we saw, right? The headline wasn't necessarily good for Apple, that, you know, their projection on ramping up production has been cut back, etc. So let's go up, let's find Apple. Okay, what's Apple been doing today? 15-minute candles. It climbed a bit and then down, right? So this is about 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. For the last 3 or 4 hours dropping, okay, this is the market open. It dropped, right? I said it climbed a bit, but actually let's point and see. This was Friday's close maybe. No, that was the open. It climbed at the open. Let's see here. It gapped down and then bounced up. Okay, this is Apple. It gapped down at the open. You see, this is Friday's close. This was today's open. It gapped down, shot up, and right after the open, after it shot up, it's been dropping ever since. Okay, makes sense. Why is Apple dropping? And why would it have made sense once you saw this high point to say, I think that's a good spot to sell, even though it was an uptrend? The headline. What was the headline? Let's go back. Apple delays iPhone production ramp up. That was 3 hours ago that was posted. 3 hours ago. Okay, this headline was there 3 hours ago. Bad news for Apple, right? Let's go to the chart and go back 3 hours. 1, 2, 3. That's somewhere back here. You could have had this price somewhere in this range here. Okay, somewhere up here. And now it's all the way down here. Okay, so you see the fundamental news was driving Apple down, which then affects, and by the way, you could think that that's a temporary thing for Apple. So maybe you say, okay, this is a good spot to buy, given that there's positive overall sentiment today. Okay, if you're a scalper, you might say, okay, I'll buy off this support level. Look, support, testing it and back up. So maybe you say, I'll take profit at this resistance level up here that it already reached today. Okay, so that's a nice little scalp move potentially to go up to this resistance, stop loss below this wick, below the support. So risking about a quarter or a third of the potential profit to the resistance, taking advantage of the fact that Apple got pulled down by a negative headline, but going with the positive sentiment of the day. Okay, a little bit of game playing you can do with the headlines, and you see that this support level coincides with this old resistance level right here. Resistance and down. Now it's support, support, support. You could take a shot at it, limited risk. You could lose, sure, no problem. Have your sell stop ready down here. Take a shot at a profit up, limited risk. If it breaks the support, you could take a shot at a sell down to the next support level down here. Okay, Why would it break the support? Maybe that news is bad enough that it's just going to break that support and keep dropping. And again, you don't have to guess. You can go in on the buy up to the resistance, off the support, limited risk to your stop loss, take a shot at a sell if it confirms that that news is bad enough to break this support. Okay, sell stop. Have your sell stop ready to go, but you're only selling if it re-breaks this support. It tested the support, went back up. Okay, if it breaks enough that it gets below this wick and this wick, maybe you're in on a sell stop. Okay, we don't know for sure if that headline's enough to keep it dropping, right? So you wait for confirmation with pending orders. Sell stop below that support. All the while, you potentially could profit with a buying up off the support. Either way, you can limit the risk without risking much on those moves. Okay. If it triggers the sell stop, your stop loss can be just back above that broken support if it were to hit that price. Okay. So you don't have to be right every time to profit. Not at all. You just have to be smart with entry points, exit points, level of risk, etc. So let's look at Dow Jones. What did the Dow Jones do today? Up. It went climbing up. These are 15-minute candles. So for hours, it was climbing today, and then it leveled off. So it's pulled back a little bit. And so you might look for an opportunistic entry point if you believe the positive sentiment is still there. You also could sell. Here's the resistance, right? Resistance from last week, or no, from earlier today, sorry. From earlier today, resistance hit here. Then it hit it again. Then it hit again 3 times off this resistance, and down it's coming. Okay, so I see 2 opportunities here, honestly. The news today, the positive sentiment, great. States are starting to reopen, feel good about it. There's been upward movement, great. Now you can say, I'll take advantage of the high point and sell. And my stop loss is above this resistance that's been established. Resistance, resistance, resistance. That's a short, small risk to get to the top side of that resistance, to get out with your stop loss if you want. Potential profit, you decide how quick you'd scalp the profit or whether you stay in longer. But here's your first support level. Support here. Likely if it hits this spot, it'll bounce a little bit as it reaches this support level here. Those of you that are more patient might wait for the next support level down here. Okay, it hit here and climbed, which is this old resistance level. Resistance down, breakthrough became support here, and it was support earlier today here. So you could look to take profit on a sell with a pullback, okay? And why guess? You might say, well, the sentiment was positive today. Why are you selling? Why not buy? Selling because there's a technical downtrend and a nice resistance level. We understand why it went up. Okay, there was positive sentiment. We also can see what's happening in front of our eyes. Bad news about Apple. Apple pulled the NASDAQ down today, actually, if we look at it. And we see a downtrend. So you could already be in the money as I was talking the last 5 minutes if you sold on this, right? Limited risk, no guarantee you're going to win, but some reason why you might believe in a pullback. And you don't have to give up on the positive sentiment. What kind of pending order, again, do we put above this resistance? A buy stop up here, okay, at the top. You program a buy stop. If it breaks the resistance, okay, momentum continues. You're in. Buy away, right? If it breaks the resistance and goes up and triggers your buy stop. So I think good opportunity for a pullback that we're watching. Also, prepare for a buy stop in case the momentum continues. Have your pending order ready to go. Again, limited risk with your stop loss down here if it breaks the resistance to trigger the buy stop. These are all options, by the way. You don't have to limit your risk with a stop loss. It's just an idea. You could put your stop loss 2 levels down. Sometimes I like to put my stop loss once a buy stop is triggered. I don't want my stop loss so close. Sometimes I'll put it below 2 support levels. so I can be more patient with it. It all depends on whether you're scalping a small move or more patient with a longer term move. Okay. All right. Any questions? It's probably a good time to pause. Any questions or comments? Okay, looks like everyone's with me. So why don't we look at the S&P 500? You see Dow Jones went up, resistance dropping. Okay, uh, DAX went up, also pulling back a bit. But you know the DAX looks a little different. The resistance was broke. Resistance, resistance. It broke the resistance and is coming back down. So you might see this as an opportunity to buy in the DAX. Here's the old resistance level, right? Resistance, 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 breakthrough. So as this nears this old resistance, this is a support level here now. This line here that used to be resistance is now support. So you could take a very limited risk. It's right on that support. You could take a limited risk buy on the DAX 30 with your stop loss just below this support level. That's an opportunistic entry point if you believe the markets will kick back up. And the DAX isn't affected by Apple directly, right? Apple's not in, European indices, etc. So this resistance is already broken here, and it's on that support now. This could be an opportunistic buy, and with limited risk to your stop loss just below that support. And again, I'm not saying you should buy. Just understand the situation. Positive sentiment today, not curtailed by Apple with the DAX. Okay, and so maybe this support level you trust as a market buy, you put your stop loss below and let it go. Limited risk, much larger potential in that type of setup. All right. So DAX looks interesting. And you obviously could also set up a sell stop below that support level. If it breaks this support and comes down, sell stop, waiting to go. Okay, just in case the market fools us. But we do see it bouncing off that support. You see? It's not a coincidence, by the way, for those of you that are new to this, it's not a coincidence that this is bouncing right at the old resistance level. Resistance, 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 breakthrough. When it pulls back, it's bouncing right up off that level. And it's not like it's not like I'm a genius or something that this candle turned green right as I said, wow, that's a nice entry point. It might bounce off that support, and there it goes green. Okay, it's simple technical analysis. And when you get these entry points and you put the sentiment in your favor, today positive sentiment, many times you can be right more than you're wrong. Okay, not always, but many times enough to improve that P&L. The end of the day, end of the week, end of the month, hopefully. Now let's look at NASDAQ. Look at NASDAQ, right? Why is NASDAQ dropping? Highly affected by the tech stocks a lot of times. So it could be Apple really weighing on NASDAQ here. So of the US indices, this one seems to be struggling the most and looks like it just broke a support level. Okay, so if you feel more bearish about US markets than bullish, and if you're looking for maybe a longer term move through the week, okay, maybe you take a market sell now on NASDAQ to hedge maybe something else you were buying on that you were more positive about, perhaps on the US market. And maybe your stop loss is above this major resistance. Resistance, 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 and down. Broken support here. Remember I said many times I like to have two levels before I give up on a move. So if it breaks back above this resistance level, it's a broken support, so it becomes resistance. If it breaks back above here, maybe you still stay with it, and only if it breaks this resistance level, then your stop loss maybe is up here. Just an idea. Now, obviously, if you're stretching your stop loss further away and you're not just putting it above one resistance level, but your stop loss above two resistance levels, then you, for the same percent exposure, you need to take a smaller trade. And that's the sacrifice. You're sacrificing the potential profit. You're taking a smaller trade, so that you can have your stop loss further away without risking more. That way you don't get stopped out. If it just kicks up here, temporarily breaks the first resistance level, and your stop loss is really close, it closes your position, then what if it drops? You got out too quick, right? So we've probably all seen that happen. So one way to be more patient and not have your stop loss so close and be patient for a movement that you believe in the bigger picture will go a certain way, but that you also understand in the short term could go the opposite way, is to take a smaller trade and have your stop loss a couple levels up, not just above one level. So it all depends on what you're looking at. The reason specifically on NASDAQ, I would say maybe it would break this resistance and come up some, is because there is positive sentiment today. Understand that if you're trading down on the NASDAQ now, you're going against the positive sentiment. And I tend not to like to do that. So the fact that this broke the support, technical traders would say sell. Those who take into account fundamental news, which is what today is about, would say, you know what, I'll leave that opportunity alone. That might be a false breakthrough because today the news is good, right? The fundamental news looked positive. So if I was going to pass on a broken support, I might pass on this one. I might pass on selling on that simply because the fundamental news is against that. But those that are technical traders, by all means, you can sell. Put your stop loss above not just one, but two resistance levels. And by the end of the day, the fundamental news will change, right? It has for the past months and weeks. The fundamental news has been changing quick. So you could go with the negative Apple story, sell, put your stop loss up here and just wait for the sentiment to swing. And you could be right, okay? All right, so by the way, any questions, please ask as we're going. The Nikkei, aren't we seeing a repetitive pattern here? There's positive sentiment all around the world, but it seems to have died. Look, resistance, resistance, resistance. Everything hit resistance and is pulling back. Okay, so Rodolfo, no problem. I understand if you need to leave early. So everything seems to be pulling back a bit. So I think this sets up nice for buy stops, even on the Nikkei here, out of the U.S. market. It looks the same as the Dow Jones did in the S&P. So you're looking at resistance. Buy stop up here would activate if this resistance gets broken. And sell stop activates. The Nikkei sets up really nice for this. Look at this range. Ranging here. If it breaks the range at the top, buy stop. If it breaks the range at the bottom, have a sell stop ready to go. So prepare maybe 2 pending orders. Sell stop below the support, buy stop above the resistance, and wait for big news to hit. Okay? And that's on the 15-hour candles. Yeah, Emmanuel, you can use any chart you want. Right now, I'm looking at scalping moves off of the most recent support and resistance levels. Yeah, Nico, this can apply for cryptos as well. Same strategies, same concepts. Okay, I've had a request to look at oil, so let's take a look. Oil, I think we all know what's going on with oil. Even with the positive sentiment today, I think oil's still dropping. It tried to climb, it's dropping. Last I looked, and this is because of the oversupply of oil in the world paired with a global pandemic. Here's a little pullback in the last 30 minutes, okay? Just since we started the webinar, oil pulled back up some. So it hit, I can see why it pulled up. It hit $12, okay? $12 has been a mark where there's a support level a bit. If we look, let's look 4-hour candles, okay? You see here, right around 1040, there's a support. And then we see, let's go 1 hour. There was a support that was established a few hours back, right around 12. Okay, so it was support, support, support for about 4 or 5 hours, and there it went up. So that was an easy move maybe to scalp off this short-term support level. It's possible it could still break this support even today. But right now, there's a bit of a pullback in the market. You could be looking for opportunistic spots to short the market if you wanted to on oil. One spot looks to be here. What kind of pending order could you put right at 18? We see resistance, resistance. What kind of pending order would sell from 18 up here? With a small risk, if you were putting a stop loss above that resistance level, here. Sell limit, exactly. Sell limit, you could wait and see if it'll test this resistance that was established Thursday, Friday last week. Resistance, resistance, right up around 18. You could maybe get in at 17, 75, 1750, and maybe risk only $1 movement for a much larger potential profit if it pulled back down. Okay. The next spot, if it broke through and hit your stop loss, the next spot to maybe short the market here, we could see support, support, breakthrough, and drop. Here's the big plunge from last week. So if it gets back up to 20 or so, there's an old support level here that was the big drop off point last week. Okay, so I see two price points right around 18 to try and short the market again, and right around 20 if it comes up there to short the market from there with limited risk each time, right? You're not guaranteed to be right. Trading isn't about guarantees. It's about what's the fundamental news. The fundamental news is bad for oil. Why is oil bouncing? It hit a support level and there's positive sentiment today. So it was bound to pull back up some. All right. But the global supply glut is not going to disappear today or tomorrow or next week, right? The pandemic is not going to end today or tomorrow or next week. So a lot of this bearish pressure that these quarantines have put on economies and the oversupply of oil still exists. So if oil comes up to opportunistic spots, if you have a sell limit just below 18, you don't have to risk much to get above the resistance and you have a large potential profit if it drops. If it breaks that and hits your stop loss, okay, no big deal. You got another sell limit up near 20. If it hits that and activates and it breaks through, no big deal. Small loss again that you're risking to be above that resistance. But at some point, you're likely to get a large pull right back down from these resistance levels if the price climbs to them. And you don't have to risk much to take a shot at a nice large potential profit if oil drops back down. Okay? Type OK if you're with me on that. And you notice I'm not talking about buying on oil right now off that support. Okay? Why am I not talking about buying oil? The fundamental news is against oil. Okay? The fundamental news is against oil. Why do I want to buy off this little support level? You could have. Purely technical traders would have bought off this little support level and maybe already took a profit. Just a little bounce up, $1 or $2. Hey, you can make a lot of money that way. But if you're pairing it with fundamental news, you say, that's a bit risky. It's more likely to break support levels, right, than to bounce up off of them with the type of news we have right now. Sure, let's take a look at S&P 500. I have a request, and then I think maybe we'll call it quits there today. So S&P 500, let's look at it. 30-minute candles, it broke this resistance. It looks more like DAX, right? When we looked at the European indice, it had broken the resistance and was looking like it might bounce. Now this is just below what should have been support. It already broke below it. Okay, it broke below this little support level. So I see two opportunities. Short the market now because it looks like it's reversed a bit, and maybe you could take profit at the first support level because it did break this support. You could short it and take profit at the first support or longer, depending on your level of patience. And then if you want to buy, if it breaks back above that, this broken support, if it breaks back above, and I would say if it breaks above the day's high right here, that's more significant. If it bounces back up here, that's not significant in my mind. If it breaks this resistance level here, okay, where it reached today and dropped, if it breaks above, let me move that just a hair. breaks above that established resistance, then I've got a buy stop maybe waiting up here on the S&P, waiting to see if it'll come to a new high with more momentum, then I'm in. Okay, then the positive momentum still exists, right? If it breaks this high point. Why do you have to guess if the positive momentum still exists? You don't have to guess. Put a pending order above this resistance level with a buy stop. If it breaks up there and hits it, okay, take your buy position. It just confirmed an uptrend, right? With the positive momentum. If it doesn't get up there and activate your buy stop, then okay, momentum was dead. And all the while you could say, at some point, I might be convinced to sell. It doesn't have to be now. And again, I don't like to trade against the sentiment. So when I said you could sell because it broke this support, you know, that's a purely technical trader. It broke the support, sell. Today's session is about fundamental news. Fundamentally, I don't want to sell on that. I want to wait for confirmation to buy when there's positive sentiment. And so you can see this was a false breakthrough for now. It went through the support, bounced back up. I'm waiting for confirmation for a buy rather than trying to sell when there's positive sentiment on that asset. Okay? But each trader to each their own. If you're purely technical and it broke the support and you want to try and sell, go ahead. It works sometimes, right? It might work better if you pair it with the fundamental news. Listen, the FOMC committee, when they talk, people listen, Bishop. So if you're reading FOMC statements out of the US, you know, they make financial decisions and recommendations in the US. So whatever they're saying and you're listening, even if it's short-term effect on the market, they have an effect. Absolutely. So you time up that any scheduled FOMC statements or minutes that are being released, it can be helpful for what's going to happen, at least in the immediate future. Absolutely. Okay, everybody, thank you for joining. I think this is a good spot to cut out. If you're with the positive momentum today, it looks like it's trying to climb back up after testing this support. You might go with positive momentum with a limited risk at what makes sense to you. We'll be back at it with another webinar on Friday. Between now and then, good luck with your trading, okay? All right, bye for now.